Have you ever noticed something strange? The moment you finally stop chasing her, something changes. She becomes quieter, more curious. Sometimes she suddenly appears where she never used to. And if you ignore these signs, you'll completely misunderstand what's really happening. Stay with me until the very end, because the last insight explains a psychological pattern that most men never recognize until it's too late. And once you understand it, you'll never see relationships the same way again. Most men believe losing someone always looks dramatic. They imagine tears, desperate phone calls, emotional speeches, or obvious regret. Real life rarely follows that script. As a psychologist, I've learned that people often reveal their deepest emotions through what they stop doing, rather than what they start doing. When a woman truly believes she has lost a man she once took for granted, her behavior often shifts in subtle ways. These changes aren't magic. They aren't manipulation manuals. They're simply human psychology responding to the possibility of permanent loss. Here's where many men make a mistake. The moment they notice her attention returning, they rush back toward her. They assume the renewed interest means everything has been fixed. But emotional value doesn't grow because someone chases harder. It grows because someone finally understands what was almost lost. Human beings naturally adapt to what feels permanent. If someone is always available, the mind slowly begins treating that presence like background noise. Not because the person lacks value, but because certainty reduces appreciation. Then something changes. The certainty disappears. Your silence becomes unfamiliar. Your absence becomes noticeable. Your emotional independence becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't about playing games. Healthy relationships are built on honesty, respect, and communication, not manipulation. The point isn't to pretend you don't care. The point is to stop abandoning yourself in order to earn someone else's attention. That shift changes everything. The strongest men aren't emotionally cold. They're emotionally grounded. They don't beg for reassurance every day. They don't measure their worth by how quickly someone replies. They don't sacrifice their principles to avoid temporary discomfort. Instead, they build a life so meaningful that love becomes part of it, not the entire foundation. Ironically, that's often when people begin seeing their value more clearly. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't demand recognition. It quietly communicates that your peace isn't dependent on someone else's approval. And that emotional stability creates something incredibly powerful: respect. When someone realizes they may have underestimated your value, their mind naturally starts comparing the present with the past. Memories become more vivid. Conversations replay. Small moments suddenly carry greater emotional weight. It's one of psychology's quietest truths. People rarely recognize the full value of consistency until consistency disappears. So before you assume she's forgotten you, before you convince yourself that silence means indifference, ask yourself a different question. Has your absence forced a comparison that your presence never could? Sometimes the answer isn't spoken. It's revealed through behavior. And once you learn to recognize those behaviors, you'll understand why losing a genuinely grounded man affects people far more deeply than most ever admit. One of the first things many men overlook is that when someone begins to realize your absence is real, curiosity often returns before emotion is ever expressed. That doesn't mean she suddenly wants the relationship back. It doesn't mean every interaction has hidden meaning. It simply reflects something deeply human. When certainty disappears, the mind naturally starts searching for answers. As a psychologist, I've seen this pattern countless times. The human brain doesn't like unfinished stories. When someone who was once predictable becomes emotionally independent, it creates a gap in expectations. And our minds are wired to notice broken patterns. This is why she may suddenly seem more aware of your existence than she was before. Perhaps she responds more warmly than she used to. Perhaps she asks mutual friends how you're doing. Perhaps she notices changes in your life that she once ignored. None of these behaviors by themselves prove she regrets anything. Healthy psychology avoids jumping to conclusions, but they can reflect something important. Your value is being reconsidered. Many men ruin this moment because they confuse attention with commitment. The instant they sense renewed interest, they abandon the growth that made them attractive in the first place. They stop focusing on their goals. They begin checking their phone every few minutes. Their emotional center shifts back outside themselves. Without realizing it, they return to the version of themselves that depended on external validation. That dependence is exhausting, not only for you, but often for the relationship as well. Real confidence feels different. It doesn't rush to fill every silence. It doesn't panic because someone takes time to make a decision. It doesn't need constant proof that it matters. Instead, it quietly communicates something rare. I value connection, but I also value myself. That message doesn't require words. People sense it through your actions. When your emotional stability no longer depends on another person's choices, every conversation changes. Your voice becomes calmer. Your decisions become clearer. You stop trying to win every interaction because your identity is no longer at stake. Ironically, this is often when respect begins to grow. Why? Because emotional maturity is uncommon. Most people expect reactions. They expect arguments, pleading, or desperate attempts to restore certainty. When those reactions never come, they're forced to reconsider the person standing in front of them. They begin asking questions they never asked before. Was I too comfortable? Did I misunderstand his value? Did I assume he would always be there? Those questions don't arise because someone was manipulated. They arise because reality changed. And reality is one of psychology's greatest teachers. This is why Stoicism is so often misunderstood. Stoicism isn't pretending you don't care. It isn't becoming distant or emotionally unavailable. True Stoicism means refusing to let temporary emotions control permanent decisions. It means choosing self-respect over impulse, choosing patience over panic, choosing growth over obsession. When a man develops that mindset, something remarkable happens. Even if the relationship never returns, he no longer feels defined by its outcome. He becomes someone who can love deeply without losing himself. And that quiet strength is difficult to ignore. Because while charm can attract attention, emotional stability earns lasting respect. And when someone finally realizes they've lost a man who possesses both, the realization often arrives slowly, not through dramatic confessions, but through an unmistakable change in how they begin to see him. There comes a moment in many relationships when reality quietly replaces assumption. It doesn't happen during an argument. It doesn't happen after a dramatic goodbye. It often begins in complete silence. At first, she may believe you'll come back the way you always have. She expects another message, another explanation, another attempt to fix everything on your own. Days pass, then weeks, and something unexpected begins to happen. Life continues without your constant pursuit. That realization can be surprisingly powerful because expectations shape our emotional world more than most people realize. When expectations are repeatedly met, they become invisible. But when they're suddenly broken, the mind pays attention. This is where many men misunderstand the situation. They assume that if she isn't expressing regret openly, then she feels nothing. Human emotions are rarely that simple. People process loss differently. Some become quiet, some become reflective. Others throw themselves into work, hobbies, or social activities. None of these responses automatically reveal what someone truly feels. That's why emotionally mature men avoid making assumptions based on isolated behaviors. Instead, they focus on something they can control, themselves. Think about the version of you that existed before the relationship. The man with dreams. The man who laughed without needing anyone's approval. The man who had ambitions that stretched far beyond one person's opinion. Somewhere along the way, many men slowly trade that identity for constant reassurance. Without noticing it, every decision begins revolving around one question: will this make her happy? It's a kind question, but when it replaces, am I living according to my values? It creates an imbalance. Healthy relationships are partnerships between two complete people, not one person carrying the emotional weight of both. This is why personal growth matters so much. Not because it guarantees someone will come back. It doesn't. Growth is valuable because it restores something far more important than attention. It restores self-respect. When you begin honoring your own boundaries, protecting your peace, and investing in your purpose, your confidence stops depending on outcomes you can't control. That confidence changes the energy you bring into every room. You listen more carefully. You react less impulsively. You stop trying to impress everyone. Ironically, these qualities often make a person more attractive, not because they're trying harder, but because they're trying less to earn validation. People are naturally drawn to emotional steadiness. In a world filled with constant comparison, instant gratification, and emotional overreaction, calmness stands out. Not as weakness, as strength. The strongest man in the room is rarely the loudest. He's the one who doesn't need to prove his worth every 5 minutes. And when someone realizes they've lost access to that kind of presence, memories often begin to feel different. Conversations that once seemed ordinary suddenly carry meaning. Acts of kindness, once taken for granted, become easier to appreciate in hindsight. Even small moments, shared laughter, quiet support, genuine reliability, can take on greater emotional significance. This isn't because the past changed, it's because perspective changed. Distance has a remarkable way of revealing what familiarity once concealed. Whether that realization leads to renewed communication or simply personal reflection depends on many factors. Every relationship is unique, but one truth remains remarkably consistent. The man who continues building a meaningful life, regardless of who is watching, becomes stronger with time. And that strength has a quiet influence that no amount of chasing can ever replace. One of the greatest misconceptions about relationships is the belief that love alone keeps two people connected. Love matters, but long-term respect is often what determines whether a connection continues to grow or slowly fades. Respect isn't built through perfection. It isn't earned by agreeing with everything another person says. And it certainly isn't created by sacrificing your identity just to avoid conflict. Real respect develops when someone consistently demonstrates emotional stability, integrity, and self-worth. Many men don't realize the moment they begin negotiating their values simply to keep someone from leaving, they unintentionally communicate that their boundaries are flexible. At first, it may seem like kindness. Over time, however, it can slowly erode the balance that healthy relationships require. When a woman realizes she has lost a man who respected both himself and those around him, she often begins comparing him with the people she encounters afterward. Comparison is a natural psychological process. The human mind constantly evaluates experiences against previous ones. Perhaps another person gives plenty of attention but lacks reliability. Perhaps someone is exciting at first but inconsistent over time. Perhaps conversations feel entertaining yet emotionally shallow. It's during these comparisons that qualities once overlooked can become much more visible. Patience, consistency, honesty, calm under pressure, the ability to listen without immediately trying to win an argument. These aren't flashy traits. They rarely create instant excitement. But over time, they build something much more valuable: trust. Trust isn't formed through grand promises. It's built through repeated actions that match your words. People remember how safe they felt around someone who remained steady during difficult moments. Not because that person never made mistakes, because they accepted responsibility, communicated honestly, and kept growing. That's a rare combination. And rarity is often appreciated only after it's gone. Here's where Stoic psychology offers an important lesson. You cannot control another person's realization. You cannot force appreciation. You cannot accelerate someone's emotional timeline. Trying to do so usually creates frustration for both people. What you can control is your own character. Every day gives you another opportunity to become more disciplined, more thoughtful, and more emotionally resilient. That investment pays dividends regardless of the outcome of any single relationship. If she reaches out, you'll respond from confidence rather than desperation. If she doesn't, your life continues moving forward with purpose. That is genuine freedom. Freedom isn't the absence of emotion. It's the ability to experience emotion without allowing it to dictate every decision. When you develop that ability, something subtle changes. You stop viewing rejection as proof that you're not enough. Instead, you begin seeing every experience as information. What did this relationship teach me? How did I grow? Which habits strengthened the connection? Which habits weakened it? Those questions produce wisdom. Blame rarely does. As people mature, they often become less impressed by appearances and more attentive to character. They notice who keeps their promises, who remains composed under pressure, who treats others with respect, even when emotions run high. These qualities don't always receive immediate recognition, but they leave lasting impressions. And if she eventually realizes that the man she lost embodied those qualities, the realization won't come from a single dramatic moment. It will come from dozens of quiet comparisons that slowly reveal what genuine emotional strength looked like all along. Time has a way of exposing truths that emotions often hide. In the beginning, people usually judge a relationship by how it makes them feel in the moment. Excitement feels like certainty, attention feels like love, constant communication feels like security. But as weeks turn into months, those immediate emotions begin to settle, and something deeper takes their place: perspective. Perspective changes the questions people ask themselves. Instead of how exciting was this relationship, they begin asking, how did I feel when I was with him? Did I feel respected? Did I feel understood? Did I feel emotionally safe? Did I trust his words because his actions matched them? These questions matter because lasting relationships are rarely sustained by intensity alone. They are sustained by consistency. As a psychologist, I've noticed that people often underestimate the emotional impact of reliability. It's easy to admire confidence. It's easy to notice charm. But reliability is different. It doesn't demand attention. It quietly builds trust day after day until its absence becomes impossible to ignore. When someone loses that kind of stability, they don't always recognize it immediately. At first, life feels normal. There are new conversations, new distractions, new routine. Everything appears to move forward. Then reality begins making quiet comparisons. Not because anyone is trying to recreate the past, but because the mind naturally evaluates present experiences against previous ones. Perhaps she remembers how you remained calm during difficult conversations instead of escalating every disagreement. Perhaps she recalls that you celebrated her successes without turning them into competitions. Perhaps she realizes that your loyalty wasn't ordinary. It was something she had simply become accustomed to. Familiarity has an interesting effect on human perception. The things we experience every day often receive the least appreciation, not because they lack value, because the mind adapts to consistency. Only when that consistency disappears does its importance become unmistakably clear. This is why emotionally mature men never build their identity around being missed. Being missed is outside your control. Being respected is influenced by how you choose to live. There is an enormous difference. A man who depends on being remembered lives in uncertainty. A man who depends on his own principles carries his confidence wherever he goes. That confidence isn't arrogance. It doesn't announce itself. It appears in simple decisions, keeping your word, respecting your boundaries, continuing to improve your health, your career, your friendships, and your purpose even when nobody is applauding. People notice that kind of discipline, sometimes immediately, sometimes much later. But genuine character has a way of revealing itself over time. And here's something many men overlook. The goal was never to make someone regret losing you. Regret is an emotion you cannot manufacture, predict, or control. The real goal is to become the kind of man whose value doesn't depend on another person's recognition. Because when your self-worth comes from your character instead of someone else's approval, you stop living reactively. You begin making decisions that serve your future instead of your fears. Ironically, that's often when others begin seeing you differently. Not because you've changed to impress them, but because you've stopped changing yourself just to avoid losing them. And that quiet transformation is one of the most powerful forms of strength a man can develop, one that continues shaping every relationship he will ever have, including the one he has with himself. There is a quiet moment that many people never talk about. It doesn't happen when the relationship ends. It doesn't happen when the last message is sent. It happens much later, when emotions have settled and life has become ordinary again. That's when clarity often arrives. Without the intensity of the moment, people begin seeing the relationship through a different lens. They remember not only the mistakes but also the qualities that were easy to overlook while everything felt familiar. As a psychologist, I've learned that memory is selective. People rarely remember every conversation. They remember patterns. They remember how consistently someone showed up. They remember whether they felt respected. They remember whether someone's presence brought peace or constant uncertainty. Those emotional impressions last much longer than dramatic moments. If you spent the relationship trying to prove your worth every single day, you may have forgotten something essential. Your value was never meant to be argued. It was meant to be demonstrated through your character. Character is what remains when emotions fluctuate. Anyone can be kind when life is easy. Anyone can be confident when everything is going their way, but remaining respectful during disagreement, remaining honest when the truth is uncomfortable, remaining disciplined when nobody is watching, those are the qualities that define a person's character, and those qualities become more valuable with time. This is one reason Stoic philosophy continues to resonate across generations. It reminds us that external events are often outside our control, but our responses belong to us. You cannot control whether someone appreciates you today. You cannot control whether someone reaches out tomorrow. You cannot control how another person interprets the past, but you can control whether you continue becoming someone you respect. That is where lasting confidence begins, not in compliments, not in attention, not in validation, in self-respect. When a man reaches that point, something remarkable changes. He stops fearing silence. He stops interpreting every unanswered message as a judgment of his worth. He stops chasing certainty from people who cannot provide it. Instead, he builds certainty from within. That inner stability affects every part of his life. His friendships become healthier. His work becomes more focused. His family notices his patience. His decisions become less emotional and more intentional. People often mistake this transformation for emotional distance. It isn't. In fact, emotionally grounded men are often capable of loving more deeply because they no longer confuse love with dependency. They give affection freely without expecting it to solve every insecurity. They communicate honestly without trying to control outcomes. They understand that mutual respect grows when two individuals choose each other, not because either one is afraid of being alone. That mindset changes relationships completely. Whether someone recognizes your value today or years from now is impossible to predict. Every person grows at a different pace. Every relationship follows its own path. But one principle remains consistent. When you continue investing in your integrity, your discipline, and your emotional maturity, you never truly lose. Because even if one chapter closes, you carry those qualities into every chapter that follows. And those qualities will always outlast temporary emotions, fleeting attention, or the opinions of anyone who failed to recognize them in the moment. If you've stayed with me until this moment, I want to leave you with one truth that has changed the lives of many men I've worked with over the years. The greatest victory is not hearing someone say, "I made a mistake." The greatest victory is waking up one day and realizing you no longer need to hear those words. That is the moment real freedom begins. Many people spend years hoping for closure from someone else. They imagine one final conversation, one heartfelt apology, one message that explains everything. Sometimes that conversation happens. Sometimes it never does. If your peace depends on receiving it, you've handed control of your happiness to circumstances you cannot command. Stoic psychology teaches something far more empowering. Peace is not something another person gives you. It is something you build through your daily choices. Every workout you complete when motivation is low, every promise you keep to yourself, every difficult conversation you handle with honesty instead of anger, every morning you choose purpose over resentment. Those small decisions seem insignificant in the moment. Months later, they become your identity, and identity shapes destiny far more than emotion ever will. Now think back to the man you were before this relationship. Then compare him with the man you have the opportunity to become. Not because someone left, not because someone may return, but because adversity has a unique way of revealing hidden strengths. Every challenge asks the same question. Will this experience make you more bitter, or more disciplined, more fearful, or more courageous, more dependent, or more self-aware? The answer is never found in what someone else chooses. It is found in what you choose every single day. Ironically, this is often the point where people begin to see you differently. They notice the calmness that wasn't there before. They notice that you speak with confidence instead of seeking approval. They notice that your life continues moving forward with purpose, whether anyone is watching or not. That quiet transformation is difficult to ignore because it isn't performed, it's real. And authenticity has a presence that no performance can imitate. If she realizes she lost someone who possessed that kind of character, that realization belongs to her journey. You don't need to force it. You don't need to wait for it. You don't need to build your future around it. Your responsibility is simpler and far more powerful. Protect your integrity, respect your boundaries, invest in your health, strengthen your mind, build meaningful friendships, pursue work that gives your life direction, learn from your mistakes without allowing them to define you. Become the kind of man whose confidence is rooted in values rather than validation. Because the strongest men are not the ones who never experience heartbreak. They are the ones who allow heartbreak to refine their character instead of reducing their self-worth. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of all. Sometimes the person who truly needed to recognize your value wasn't the one who walked away. It was you. If this message challenged the way you think about relationships, self-respect, and emotional strength, let it become more than just another video. Reflect on it. Apply it and return to it whenever you need a reminder that lasting confidence is built from within. And if you found value in these insights, consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who could benefit from the same perspective. You never know which conversation might help someone take the first step toward becoming the strongest version of themselves.